Welcome to the Insight Meditation Community of Charlottesville, Virginia. You can find all of our program offerings and information about our Sangha at www.imeditation.org. We meet weekly on Tuesday evenings at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, currently on the Zoom platform for meditation and a Dharma talk given by one of our teachers. We also meet daily at noon Eastern Time on Zoom for sitting practice. We hope you can join us.
So welcome everybody to our Tuesday night Sangha. My name is Kristina. I'm going to be the teacher tonight. Okay, so we'll sit for a little over 30 minutes. For those who have an established practice, feel free to practice in the way that works for you. I'll offer some guidance. For those of you who are new to meditation, 30 minutes can be a long time, so please feel free to take breaks, to stand, to do what you need to do. Give it a try. But we'll begin by just finding a comfortable posture. You can keep your video on or off. In a comfortable way to sit such that you can be both alert and relaxed. They're closing the eyes or keeping a soft gaze at some object in front of you. To find a comfortable way to sit, might take 2 or 3 deep intentional breaths. On the in-breath, helping your body to be alert and awake. And on the out-breath, helping you to relax. Allowing your breath to naturally find a comfortable rhythm. And letting your attention just rest in the experience of breathing. You might notice the touch of air at your nostrils, rise and fall of your chest or your belly. Letting your mind become absorbed in the physical experience of breathing. And when you find that your attention has wandered from noticing the experience of breathing, the invitation is to notice what it feels like to become aware of that. It's a little moment of waking up. Noticing, have I been pulled into thinking, pulled into listening, sound, distraction? Releasing any judgment of that, relaxing the body, and gathering your attention back in the experience of breathing. It doesn't matter how many times you notice that your attention has wandered from the breath. All that matters is that you're observing that experience of waking up gently without judging your practice, relaxing the body, rediscovering the breath, bringing your attention there again. Continuing to rest awareness in the physical sensations of breathing. We're about halfway through our sit, so those who maybe are newer to this practice, this might be a good time to take a stretch break. Keeping your awareness in the experience of the body as you do that. Coming back to a comfortable posture, coming back to awareness of breathing. And every time you discover your attention has wandered from the breath, it's an opportunity to notice, this is what it feels like to wake up to the present moment without any judgment. Relax the body and begin again, noticing the experience of breathing. And in the last few minutes of the sit, you may wish to relax your focus on the anchor of breathing and just allow the mind to open expansively to your experience. Noticing the present moment experience of sitting where you're sitting, the sounds, the temperature, the quality of light, sensations in the body, thoughts in the mind, any feelings that are visiting through. Just for a couple minutes, holding spacious awareness. This is what life is like right now. By way of closing our sit together tonight, you may wish to join me in offering appreciation to our community gathered here this evening. Appreciation for the practice of each person. Appreciation for our own practice. The wholesome intentions and efforts that brought us here this evening. May our wholesome intentions and efforts in practice be combined with those of contemplatives throughout space and time. May our practice benefit the happiness and the freedom of all beings. So for those who maybe joined partway through the sit, I just want to introduce myself. So my name is Kristina Weaver. My pronouns are she, her. As you probably could hear in the background tonight, I have a tween. I'm the single mom of a joyful tween daughter named Amaka. And I'm queer. I'm a lesbian. So like to mention that because I think we haven't historically had a very visible queer Sangha at IMCC, but certainly there are queer folks among us. I've been part of IMCC for about 12 years in different capacities, and I currently serve on the HERE committee, previously on the board for many years, particularly before my daughter got to be a little older. And very occasionally, I've been honored to teach on Tuesday nights. I want to open tonight by briefly acknowledging that here in Charlottesville, we are occupying unceded land of the Monacan Indian Nation. Behind me is an array of boxes, because as I've shared with some of you, I'm in the process of moving to Richmond, so not far, but I am leaving Charlottesville in a few weeks. I'm very grateful that I'll still be very connected to this community through my co-parent and through dear friendships, and also through our Sangha. I don't know exactly how things will unfold, but I very much intend to continue to be part of the Sangha and an active visitor. And I'm grateful actually for the Zoom link and the possibilities of hybrid ways to connect even when we're back in person, to facilitate that for me. But it occurred to me just today as I was contemplating tonight, how fortunate I feel that I'm able to give this talk towards the end of what has been an amazing chapter in my life of just living in Charlottesville, and how big a part of that IMCC, the massive role that IMCC has played in my life. So I want to take this opportunity to really extend so much love and appreciation and admiration to all of you in the Sangha, and to those spiritual friends who aren't here tonight. The ways in which IMCC has touched my life, I can't even put into words. It's so, so, so important to me. I also want to share at the beginning of my talk tonight that I am planning to reflect on Memorial Day tonight. I know that the title of the talk, I only got it to Judy today, so there wasn't a lot of time to circulate that. But I am going to share some stories that could be upsetting or emotional to hear. And I wanted to mention that, to invite you to take care of yourself. It's perfectly fine to bow out if that sounds like a heavy topic for a Tuesday night for you right now. I won't be offended. I won't be upset. Just really encourage folks to take care of themselves. That will be the topic of my talk. And this is the second time that I've had the opportunity to give a Dharma talk for IMCC around Memorial Day. The first talk, I think it was the first talk I gave, was several years ago now. And I took the opportunity to speak about Memorial Day then as well, because it's a day that happens to have great personal meaning for me. And so it's always a time in the year when I engage in spiritual reflection about sort of what that meaning is and how that unfolds for me. And as I shared in that talk years ago, this is because my younger brother, Todd Weaver, was killed in Afghanistan in 2010. So I'm what they call a Gold Star sister, surviving family member of a fallen soldier. He was 26 years old, and he stepped on an IED just days before he was scheduled to come home to his wife and his 1-year-old daughter, Kylie. So like the others in my family and his good friends, I think about Todd most days, but I do set aside special time to honor him, in particular 3 times a year. On September 9th, which was the day he was killed, I usually retreat to nature, and I now, because we're 10 years out, more than 10 years out, I really take the opportunity to just feel my own grief and sort of the honor and the privilege of being able to tap into that grief. And on October 22nd, his birthday, I take my daughter Amaka Todd. She has her middle name is after him. I take her out of school and I take off work and we play hooky, and we call it Uncle Todd Day. And we have lots of little adventures doing all the things that Todd loved when he wasn't a soldier, when he was just a little kid or a young person. So we eat mint chocolate chip ice cream, and we have whipped cream fights, and we watch Sonic the Hedgehog cartoons, and all those little things to try to give her a sense of who he was, beyond being the soldier. And then Memorial Day is the third day that I set aside. And for me, it's really a day of spiritual contemplation to reflect on how my brother's personal journey connects with the big picture of the country that we're all part of, its wars, its values, its contradictions, and also how his journey connects with the human experience. And the opportunities that I have as the living, that we have as the living, to make meaning and to make good use of the time we have. So when I gave my Memorial Day talk at IMCC several years ago, I was really focused on encouraging myself and others to approach the day as a time to face some of the realities of war, a time to muster a kind of courageous love that is willing to bear witness to those realities. Because the wars that our country has been involved with in my lifetime have been sort of experienced by a very tiny percentage of Americans. And, most people will think of Memorial Day as a time to say Happy Memorial Day and to have fun, which actually I don't begrudge anybody. But sort of the invitation to also take a little bit of time to reflect on these larger realities. To pause and feel more fully the collective sense of catastrophe, that even if we're not always aware of it, we're still part of it. And in so doing, we can begin to feel our interdependence with all of the beings who are touched by war. This has always been important for me because I think our society, and in particular its dominant white culture, is especially practiced at sort of euphemizing war and violence and sanitizing it. And so we can reclaim Memorial Day as a time to touch into the devastating reality of what war does to a life, to a family, to a community, to a population, and to a generation. And that was what I was focusing on at that time. But the events of this year of 2022, and in particular recent events, they have really ushered my reflections in a new direction this year. It seems that we hardly have a choice anymore to turn away, even if we wanted to. Even those of us who have the privilege generally to choose whether or not to engage, we are having to face more and more often and more directly how the forces of violence and oppression that others have long weathered are not very far away from our personal lives. Ours is an interdependent world, and our society is in a state of fairly continual crisis. Pandemics, the war in Ukraine, climate change, these global forces, they just can't be compartmentalized and repressed. They show up in our lives in myriad ways. And lately, it certainly feels as though the wars our country has been part of for many years have come home to roost. We see it in the epidemic of extreme gun violence, fueled by military-grade weapons that Americans are turning on Americans. Most recently manifested in the tragic mass shooting in a 4th grade classroom in Uvalde, Texas. And we see it in the ongoing examples of violent racial hatred in our society. Most recently, the mass murders committed by a white supremacist who set out to terrorize a Black community in Buffalo. And what I've been sitting with on a personal level is that, unfortunately and tragically, as climate change progresses, and in light of the massive political, cultural, and economic divisions in our society, there will likely be more unthinkable tragedies ahead. And I know that myself and many of us like me, who are from communities that are less practiced in coping collectively with oppression and with violence, we've been reeling from blow after blow of devastating news. Shock upon shock, each tragedy seems to drive us towards numbing or isolating or burning out. But we know those strategies provide only temporary relief, not a real solution to the reality of this suffering. So what does our spiritual practice teach us about how to cope better with the realities of our world? The teachings point us to the first noble truth, the reality of dukkha, of suffering. All of this spiritual path traces back to the foundational insight, the reality that suffering exists. In a sutta known as the fire sermon, dukkha is likened to a raging fire. And this is an excerpt from the sutta. The all is a flame. What all is a flame? The I is a flame. Forms are a flame. Consciousness of the I is a flame. Contact of the I is a flame. And whatever there is that arises in dependence on contact at the I, experienced as pleasure, pain, or neither pleasure nor pain, that too is a flame. A flame with what? A flame with the fire of passion, the fire of aversion, the fire of delusion. A flame, I tell you, with birth, aging and death, with sorrows, lamentations, pains, distresses, and despairs. And the sutta goes on to enumerate how, similarly, like the eye, the ear is a flame, the nose is a flame, the tongue, the body, the intellect, a flame. The sutta says, a flame with what? A flame with the fire of passion, the fire of aversion, the fire of delusion. A flame with birth, aging, and death, with sorrows, lamentations, pains, distresses, and despairs. Everything is on fire. I really appreciate the vividness of this teaching from the Buddha. Everywhere we turn, through all of our sense gates, all phenomena are aflame. Everything is on fire with suffering, on fire with dukkha. It can sound pretty grim. And people who are new to Buddhism sometimes comment on how very pessimistic this path seems to be. Because after all, the first noble truth, there is suffering, all this talk of suffering. But the good news, of course, is that the first noble truth is accompanied by three others. Yes, suffering exists. We have to wrap our minds around that reality. But we also learn that suffering arises from a mechanism in the mind that clings to phenomena which are inherently impermanent and can never satiate our desires. And because that mechanism is the cause of suffering, it follows that there can be an end to dukkha, an end to suffering. By working with the mind along the path of practice, of insight, and of community, it is possible to become increasingly free, not from pain, but from suffering. In our spiritual tradition, we are invited to take refuge in what's known as the three gems. The Buddha, which we can understand to be both the inspiring story of the historical figure, as well as our own innate Buddha nature. The Dharma, the teachings, and also the direct experience of the practices of meditation, of the path. And the Sangha, our community, the three gems. And in my contemplation this year about Memorial Day and my brother's sacrifice, I've been deepening my sense of refuge in those gems. When Todd was killed, I was relatively new to our Sangha and to Charlottesville. I'd been here a couple years. I didn't know who to really turn to locally when that tragedy struck my life. You know, most of my good friends were overseas. I didn't know who to turn to or who would show up for me. And it was IMCC more than anybody else that showed up for me. The active teachers at the time reached out to me with their gifts of presence, of compassion, of wisdom, and of love. And I still get messages from them every year on Memorial Day. I'll never forget that love that I received from our teachers. I'll never forget how several teachers climbed this rickety, frankly dangerous external staircase that I had at this Belmont apartment I was living in, climbed that steep staircase and just sat with me and had tea with me and listened and let me cry and just offered their presence as I came to terms with the most grief I had ever experienced. In the months that followed Todd's death, we learned more and more about what had happened. And one of the things that we learned is that his friends, his battle buddies, the soldiers in his platoon, after he had stepped on the IED, they recovered what they could of him, and they carried the pieces of his body quite some distance until they could be airlifted away. And sometimes I think about how the members of our Sangha helped me to recover the pieces of myself after it had been shattered by the trauma of losing Todd, helped me to find those pieces and carry them home to myself. One of the most important ways we cope in the face of the reality of dukkha, of suffering, we lean on Sangha, we lean on community. Just like I did, we can take refuge in this gem, the witnessing and the encouragement of Sangha. And I'll never forget how our teacher, Pat Coffey, just a few days into my bereavement, he called me on the phone. I was at my parents' home and we were all still sick with the shock of grief. But we were also at that stage where we had begun to isolate ourselves in our shock. It's as if he knew exactly when to call me. And Pat knew enough about me to know that I was pretty far left politically, and that I generally opposed war, and that I might be struggling to come to terms with how and why my brother had died, with the point of it all. And Pat knew just what to say to me and his words continue to comfort me a decade later. Me, that throughout time and space, there have always been people who have been called to walk the warrior's path. That there is something archetypal and timeless and honorable about this calling. And that regardless of the circumstances surrounding the life and death of the warrior, we can honor and admire their incredible spirit. And Todd truly fit that archetype. And as I reflect on the kind of warrior he was, I touch into the warrior within myself, the part of me who is capable of mustering courage to face reality, to face fear, to navigate the hazards of this human life in this particular time and place, to dedicate my efforts not only to myself, but to the well-being of others. The historical Buddha was a kind of warrior as well, a young man who set off with fierce determination to find real spiritual freedom. We can take refuge in this gem, the archetype of courageous love, a warrior's love. Its words remained close to my heart through the year of active bereavement after Todd was killed. And I took them with me as I pursued opportunities to meet with the soldiers who had served with Todd and who had known him in battle. One of the most important of these meetings was with a friend of his named Casey. When I met Casey, he was still in the hospital, recovering from the loss of his right leg to an IED. He had been hit after Todd's death at a later date. At the time Todd was killed, Casey was spared. He was the last person to be with Todd in life. And he told me the story of what had happened. Todd was a first lieutenant, a platoon leader, stationed in Kandahar, Afghanistan, which at that time was called the tip of the spear. It was literally the most dangerous region in the war. And he was leading an early morning reconnaissance mission through an area known to be riddled with IEDs, improvised explosive devices. Todd and Casey were sent out first when it was still dark. And they were taking all the precautions they could, but they were in literally one of the most dangerous places on the planet. And Casey spoke to me about the amount of sheer terror that he felt that morning. And he said that he would not have been able to cope with his fear if Todd had not been there with him. That Todd was cracking jokes and helping him smile right up until the very moment he was killed. He was smiling and helping another smile in the last moment of his life. I often ask myself, how did Todd work with his own mind such that he was able to choose this kind of lightness of being for the benefit of himself and his friend, even in the midst of the most dangerous circumstance imaginable? My brother Todd was a happy human being. He was not perfect. He was not free from dukkha. But in his 26 years, he had learned to cultivate and preserve a core sense of happiness, no matter the external conditions. The Dalai Lama speaks often about happiness. He has said that the purpose of our lives is to be happy, and that happiness is determined more by one's state of mind than by external events. This is not the fleeting happiness that comes from temporarily satisfying the cravings of the body or the mind. It is the happiness of a warrior, of one who has developed some kind of new relationship with dukkha, with suffering. Todd was already a veteran when he served in Afghanistan. He had served in Iraq as an even younger person, a kid really. and he had lost friends there. For several years, he had been cultivating a way through that trauma, developing within himself a way to be with it. And at the core of his way of being was a quality of appreciation for all the simple moments of life, and a way of being with others in that simple presence. I believe that that is part of the quality of mind he was able to draw from on his final morning on earth. The fruit of cultivating equanimity of mind and compassion towards self and others, even in the midst of a minefield. We can take refuge in this gem, the practices and teachings that help us cultivate ease and wellness and even happiness in the face of the great reality of dukkha, of suffering. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote, "When we learn to acknowledge, embrace, and understand our suffering, we suffer much less." As we navigate the challenges of our own personal lives set against the macro challenges of this time and place that we inhabit, we may find some strength in simply recognizing the flames around and within us for what they are: dukkha. Beginning of finding a way through the reality of suffering is to sit with an acknowledgement that this is real. And as we proceed from this first noble truth, we can draw inspiration and support from the qualities of determination, of courage, of solidarity, and of insight that help us gather our resources and bear the heat of our circumstances. Tonight, I have offered some precious stories of my brother's life and death, in the hopes that they may provide some inspiration to you also. A glimpse into the kind of warrior spirit that a person is capable of nurturing. In the midst of all the conditions and circumstances he was navigating, all the pressures, fears, and moral dilemmas, Todd found a way to hold himself with some kind of ease for the benefit of himself and others. May each of us cultivate some kind of ease in relation to the dukkha in our lives. May all beings be at ease. May all beings have the support that we and they need to cultivate happiness. May all beings be happy. May there be peace and the conditions of peace. May there be freedom and the conditions of freedom. May all beings without exception and throughout time be easeful, be happy, be peaceful, and be free. And as a final gesture to honor my brother Todd, I want to close tonight with asking Judy to play for us his favorite song. And when the song ends, we'll hold space for any comments and reflections that folks want to share.
You know, well, I'm a chicken fried and cold beer on a Friday night, a pair of jeans that fit just right, and the radio. Well, I was raised up beneath the shade of a Georgia pine, and that's home, you know. Sweet tea, pecan pie, and homemade wine, where the peaches grow. In my house, it's not much to talk about, but it's filled when love is grown in southern ground, and a little bit of chicken fried. Cold beer on a Friday night, a pair of jeans that fit just right, and the radio up. I like to see the sunrise, see the love in my woman's eyes, feel the touch of a precious child, and know a mother's love. It's funny how it's the little things in life that mean the most. Not where you live, what you drive, or the price tag on your clothes. There's no dollar sign on a piece of mind, this I've come to know. So if you agree, have a drink with me, raise your glasses for a toast to a little bit of chicken fried and cold beer on a Friday night, a pair of jeans that fit just right, and the radio up. I like to see the sunrise, see the love in my woman's eyes, feel the touch of a precious child, and know a mother's love. Thank God for my life and for the stars and stripes. May freedom forever fly. Let it ring. Salute the ones who died, the ones that give their lives so we don't have to sacrifice all the things we love, like our chicken fried and cold beer on a Friday night, a pair of jeans that fit just right, and the radio up. I like to see the sunrise, see the love in my woman's eyes, feel the touch of a precious child, and know a mother's love. Get your little chicken fried and cold beer on a Friday night, a pair of jeans that fit just right, and the radio up. I like to see the sunrise, see the love in my woman's eyes, feel the touch of a precious child, and know a mother's love.
Thank you all. That's all I got.